What if I told you a simple chocolate tart led to a breakup between one of the world's greatest chefs and a Hollywood icon? I'm Gary from Big Spud, and I'm looking at the relationship between Marco Pierre White and Michael Caine, who had a restaurant business together in the 90s. And by way of looking at that, I'm going to look at an intense, decadent chocolate tart that formed one of the signature dishes on their menu. Their restaurant, the Canteen, was a success. Marco Pierre White, the enfant terrible of the 90s Michelin dining scene in London, and Sir Michael Caine, one of the nation's most beloved and famous actors who has been acting for well over 60 years. They had a restaurant together called the Canteen, but it wasn't to last and a rift formed. But before we get into that, let's have a look at one of the recipes that made the Canteen famous. To help me in that, I'm going to use their book, Canteen Cuisine. This book is a time capsule of their work together, filled with quite simple bistro type recipes. Roast chicken and herbs, red mullet, salmon, haddock, and other familiar Marco favourites. But today, I'm going to make this chocolate tart. Rich and oozy and decadent. But before that, we need to get started on pastry case. So in a machine, I'm just bringing together butter, sugar, and eggs. Beat them together with flour and water and keep mixing for a few minutes until combined. I'm then going to wrap in cling film and chill for at least 1 hour in the fridge before using to allow the gluten to relax. And so our pastries had time to rest in the fridge, so now I'm going to roll it out and drop it into my pastry case. To get the thickness that Marco desires, I'm using a rolling pin that has defined discs on it so that it only rolls it to a certain depth. So I ended up halving the amount of dough I'm using. It was just way too much. So I'll reflect that in the recipe that I link below. It's a beautifully smooth plasticine dough though. So now I've filled it with greaseproof paper. I'm going to blind bake it for 15 minutes. In any workplace, whether it's a high stakes restaurant kitchen or a typical 9-to-5, tensions can arise. Egos clash, conflict is inevitable, and sometimes even the strongest relationships can fracture. Maybe it's a disagreement with a colleague, frustration with a boss, but everything can get on top of you. But here's the thing, those issues don't just stay at work. They can invade your personal thoughts as well. I can speak from personal experience. I've had conflicts in my workplace, and you think about it when you're at home as well. It's not just a workplace issue. Talking about it is key. Therapy can really help. I'm really pleased to say this video is a paid partnership with BetterHelp, an online therapy service that makes getting support straightforward and flexible. You start by answering a few quick questions, and in most cases within a couple of days, you'll match with a credentialed therapist who suits your needs. If it doesn't feel like the right fit, no problem. You can switch at any time for free, no stress, no fuss. And because it's all online, you can do therapy in the way that works best for you. BetterHelp offers a simple way to get professional support from the comfort of your own home. With their network of therapists, you can talk through workplace stress, relationship challenges, or anything else on your mind, all online at a time that works for you. So if you've been feeling the pressure with relationships or work or whatever, don't wait for it to boil over. Try BetterHelp today and get matched with a therapist in as little as 48 hours. Click the link in the description, betterhelp.com/bigspud, to get 10% off your first month and take the first step to getting help. Marco Pierre White and Sir Michael Caine's business relationship revolved around the Canteen, a high-profile restaurant in Chelsea during the 1990s. Marco was looking to move into the area, and he was hooked up with Michael Caine, who persuaded to let him on board as an investor. Marco credits Michael Caine with him getting his 3 stars by introducing him to the right people at the right times. Initially, their collaboration appeared to be a strong meeting of minds. Caine, the legendary actor, bringing his celebrity status and business interests, and White, the volatile but brilliant chef, provided the culinary expertise. The restaurant, which was meant to offer refined yet approachable dining, was well received, and one of its signature dishes was a chocolate tart that epitomised White's commitment to a classic technique and indulgence. Classically French and yet unmistakably Marco. However, while the tart is iconic, it was not the cause of the eventual falling out between Marco and Michael. There are a lot of rumours surrounding what happened exactly. Did Michael Caine ask for fish and chips to be on the menu? This has been disputed by both sides. Marco met his wife whilst working at the canteen as she was staff. Whatever happened, both sides appear to be bound by a legal contract that forbids them, either of them, from talking about it. In fact, there was a news story doing the rounds that Marco was going to spill all in his autobiography, but that never materialised. Ultimately, their disagreement led to White stepping away from the business venture, and their relationship soured as a result. Michael Caine came out of the restaurant business as well, so it clearly didn't end well. So it's had 15 minutes, and unfortunately, the pastry has fallen away. At this point, we're going to remove everything and then bake it for 5 minutes more just to dry out the surface of the tart. Of course, it's not cooked yet. Blind baking is just preparing the filling, preparing the pastry case so that it's set before we put something wet into it. So let's see what happens. This is, of course, a chocolate tart, so the chocolate is really, really important. And I've got myself some Valrhona chocolate. Valrhona, often classed as one of the best you can buy for cooking with and just nice to eat. Funnily enough, and this is a coincidence, Marco specifically requests Valrhona Equatorial chocolate for this recipe. I don't quite know what the Equatorial one is, but this book is 30 years old, so no doubt they've changed their ranges over time, but I'm going to use some 70% in my filling. So I've got some of my chocolate melting behind me, I've got some milk and cream coming to a simmer, and I'm going to eventually pour them all over whisked eggs, which is what I'm doing now. I wasn't quite sure what this filling would be called. I mean, I guess it's a ganache, but I ran it past a pastry chef I know who said it's a chocolate creme pat. He was a bit puzzled that it had no sugar in it, and I hadn't even clocked that. So it's going to be very chocolate forward, shall we say. We'll see how it comes out, but it's interesting nonetheless. So I'm pouring the milk and the cream over the eggs, give it a quick whisk, and then pass through a sieve to get rid of any lumpy eggy bits that have coagulated, and then we'll combine all this with the chocolate. So I was concerned that wasn't going to come together, but suddenly it all folded together. Now, one of the strangest things is we're going to pour this back into the case, into the oven that's still on 180 degrees from earlier, and then turn the oven off immediately. So there's no direct heat, just the residual heat in the oven. So we'll see how that goes, I guess. So I've got twice as much as I need in the oven now, and turn it off immediately, and we'll see what happens. So our tart has had 45 minutes, and it's got absolute mirror shine to it. Just the tiniest wobble. And now basically I'm going to leave it to cool before decorating and tasting it. All right, well, it's had time to cool off. So, oh, there we go. It's come straight out. And now for decoration, I'm going to use some more Valrhona, but a slightly milkier version so that we contrast all that dark richness. I'm just using a vegetable peeler. And finally, a dusting of icing sugar. It's very soft. And here we go with our chocolate tart. Actually, it's possibly still a touch too warm because that chocolate that I've grated over the top has started to just break down. Not really melt, but just, it's not flaked. So maybe I should be waiting even longer. Okay, let's dig in for a go. So this ganache or creme pat or whatever it is very indulgent. This wedge that I've got here, a perfect portion, trust me. It's very skinny, but because it's so dense and rich with that Valrhona chocolate, it's really indulgent, as a chocolate tart should be. I think you need the icing sugar and the extra flakes on top. And if, unlike me, you would wait a little longer for it to completely cool. So I'm going to cover this and try this again later. So it's the next day. I've given the tart a chance to set, and it's a very different beast the next day. It's set into a firm delice type texture, very smooth, very clean. So where are we with this? It's undeniably delicious and a real good one for a party. Of course, you could make your own pastry, you could buy a pastry case, you could buy ready rolled, and you'd be at it much quicker. The filling itself really easy to do. I was quite surprised at the lack of sugar in the recipe, but actually once you add milk chocolate shavings to the top, once you dust it with icing sugar, it just balances it enough. And of course, you should really only serve a very small slice due to how rich it is and how dark the chocolate is. Using the quality Valrhona there really makes a difference. As often with Marco recipes, as I've found on this channel, they're not terribly well written. In fact, the recipe is right, the proportions are all wrong, completely wrong. In fact, I made twice as much filling as I needed to, even though it determined exactly the size of tin you needed and pastry you needed. I'll reflect that in the recipe that I link below. I actually put the rest of it in my ice cream machine and it churned and made a lovely sort of chocolate sorbet. Really tasty, again very bitter and dark, but lovely. So it's another great Marco recipe, not well communicated, and just needs a few tweaks for the home chef. I hope you enjoyed that look into both this recipe and the history of Marco Pierre White and Michael Caine's restaurant, the Canteen. If you enjoyed that, why don't you hit the share button down below and share it to a couple of friends who you think might like that. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.